The Space Wolves of Warhammer 40K are probably the least favorite Space Marine chapter in all of the lore. But once you get past the Wolf Claw this, Wolf Sword that, they actually have really badass history, and in today's deep dive, I want to explore how grim dark the lore of the Space Wolves is, starting with their initiation trials. Even for those who thrive in the harsh environment of Fenris, the act of turning a mortal man into a Sky Warrior is a long, arduous, and incredibly perilous process. Many that undertake the trial perish. To survive is to prove one's cunning, strength, and fortitude beyond any question, and to be worthy of a successor of Russ's genetic heritage. On Fenris, strangers stalk the lands of men. In the long halls, tales are told of mysterious fur-clad wanderers who arrive in the depths of winter and challenge the strongest and most boastful of the tribesmen to bouts of strength and drinking. They are a frightening sight, huge, burly warriors with burning eyes, who always out-wrestle the strongest warriors and out-drink the staunchest. Once they have fought every challenger, they pick the most worthy and take him away into the dark, never to be seen again. When the native tribes of Fenris clash for settling rights of the new islands that have risen from the churning seas, the same strangers can often be seen standing imperiously atop a nearby hill. If a warrior shows any signs of greatness during the battle, the stranger may descend from on high and approach him, to the awe of all who witness it. Even should the chosen be at the point of death, the strangers care not. They take their prize with them away into the blizzards, and the youth is never seen again. The tribesmen do not mourn the loss of such a valiant warrior, for they know he has been chosen to live amongst the gods. The mysterious strangers that select these warriors are the wolf priests of the Space Wolves, choosers of the valiant. The youths they pick will be tested sorely, for if they have true steel in their soul, the legacy of Leman Russ will be implanted into their bodies, and they will ultimately become Space Marines, but such gifts are never given lightly. Many other trials which a young warrior must endure before he can join the ranks of the Space Wolves. Each test will try the Fenrisian's wit as well as his strength, and place him in mortal danger from which he must emerge alive, if not unscathed. If an aspirant survives the first few months of training, he must undertake the 2 trials of Morkai, one for each of the wolf gods' heads. For the first of these trials, he will be brought before the council of the Rune Priest, who will test his mind as keenly as the wolf priest challenged his body. In the very bowels of the Fang lies the Gate of Morkai, a vast portal surrounded by fiery rivers of lava. The wolf god's image crowns this mighty gate, and its carven flanks bear enchanted runes of great power. Once the young warrior has seen the ancient archway, he must pass through it. To back down is as good as admitting weakness or deceit, and the Sky Warriors do not suffer those without purity of heart or purpose to live. As soon as he steps through the gates of Morkai, the aspirant's mind belongs to the Rune Priests. They will scour his soul for doubt, impurity, and buried temptations, anything that may be used against the Space Wolves or his battle brothers by the fell and alien powers they will one day face. Only one who can steel himself against such horrors is worthy to call himself a son of Russ. The exact means by which a candidate is tested will vary according to the individual. Most commonly, an aspirant will find himself faced with impossible odds in a number of conjured scenarios. Under the spell of the Rune Priests, the young warriors will believe the situation to be reality and react according to his heart's instincts. Those who fail these tests will never wake up from their dream. The Rune Priests will scrub their minds and hand them over to the Iron Priests to serve up their lives as servitors. For those that pass, the toughest trial is yet to come. Although the length and nature of any further trials an aspirant must endure will differ, the final test is always the same. This is the test of Morkai, and it will challenge even the hardiest aspirants to the very limits of their endurance. Some fail this test and are claimed by Morkai and are forgotten. The trial is long, for the warrior is taken thousands of miles into the barren wastes beyond the fortress of the Fang. He drinks from the cup of Wolfen, and his body absorbs the first and most deadly gene seed of the Space Wolves, the unique Canis Helix. This frightening potency of the Canis Helix is legendary, and has accounted for the lives of millions of aspirants as their bodies wither and churn in anguish. Those it does not kill, it transforms into slavering monsters. The Canis Helix is necessary, as without this essential part of Leman Russ's heritage, the other gene seed organs cannot be implanted at all. While in the throes of transformation, the aspirant is cast out into the wilderness to make his own way back to the Fang. The gene works hideous changes on the warrior's mind and body. He reverts to a primal state where his bones split and buckle, his hair sprouts from across his body, and his only desire is to gorge on fresh meat and glut himself on blood. his body mass grows up to 80%, many of his bones fuse, and fangs sprout from his gums. While the body is racked with pain, the warrior must overcome the shadow within him, lest it possess him entirely. If he doesn't, he will then become a giant feral creature known as a wolfen, those who fail to overcome the curse. To become one of the wolfen is to fall from grace and to roam the wilderness forevermore as a creature of the darkest night, or be captured by his former brothers and held as a caged beast until the time is right for them to be let loose in battle. If the aspirant manages to find his way back to the Fang, despite the ravage brought upon him and the many perils that lie between him and his goal, he is implanted with the remainder of the Space Wolf's gene seed, stabilizing the Canis Helix and completing his apotheosis into a fully fledged Sky Warrior. They are welcomed into the chapter and take their place amongst the Space Wolves. As time moves on, it becomes clear that some of these warriors have not completely conquered the Canis Helix's original effects, and in times of great stress, they will alter into bestial states that haunt their souls like a ghastly shadow. This is the curse of the wolfen, and it's rightfully feared. However, as Space Marines, these successful aspirants will live for hundreds of years, as long as they don't die in battle, and they will voyage through the stars to fight in the Emperor's name. They will battle monstrous orcs and hideous demons, they will encounter the horrors of the Tyranids, and they will endure the indescribable perils of warp space. To a man born and raised amongst the warrior tribes of Fenris, this indeed is a life amongst the gods. Now that we know the brutality of the Space Wolf's initiation process, let's take a look at what it's like for a Space Wolf once he becomes a Battle Brother. Instead of organizing into squads dictated by the Codex Astartes, the Space Wolf's chapter forms their Battle Brothers into packs. These packs fight like the Fenrisian wolves do during their hunts. The Space Wolves have 4 primary types of packs in their chapter, including the Blood Claws, the Grey Hunters, the Long Fangs, and the Wolf Guard. All Space Wolf neophytes will start off in a Blood Claw pack. As the youngest and most inexperienced warriors within the Space Wolves chapter, the Blood Claws are the most eager combatants on the field of battle. They are fierce, often foolhardy warriors, eager to prove themselves and earn the respect of their elders. They will take almost any risk to win the fleeting glory that only youth and courage can bring. Confident and fresh, the Blood Claws are constantly abuzz with the belligerent enthusiasm of youth and the excitement of having ascended to the rank of the fabled Sky Warriors. Both savage and fiercely aggressive without exception, the Blood Claws have not left their glory-hunting Fenrisian tribe roots far behind, and are willing to plunge headlong into the thickest of fighting, regardless of the foe they have faced. The Blood Claws' infamous berserker charges are known throughout the galaxy, for they believe in their own invincibility and dare anyone to prove them otherwise. Blood Claws are still intoxicated by the opportunity to tread in the legendary footsteps of the giants of the chapter, and have finally been given the chance to become true heroes themselves. This knowledge, combined with a barrel of meat or two, make for a fine line between their insane acts of heroism and those of reckless foolhardiness. Blood Claws are always trying to find a way to make a name for themselves, and by doing so come to the attention of their Wolf Lord. Unlike their contemporaries from more orthodox chapters, the Sons of Rust do not train through the predictable logic of practice cages or assault corridors. For the Eldar Space Wolves that oversee the Blood Claws' development as warriors, they believe that the best training ground is the white-hot fury of the battlefield. Often Blood Claw packs are not discouraged from taking positions at the vanguard of the chapter's great companies, for their elders encourage the young warriors to learn the art of combat through direct experience. Unfortunately, the Blood Claws' glory hunting frequently leads them to overconfidence in their own abilities, and because they lack the skill and patience of their Grey Hunter brethren, this results in them often biting off more than they can chew. It is not unusual for a Blood Claw pack to rush forward to engage an enemy commander or champion, sometimes with disastrous results. For this reason, a wise and experienced Wolf Guard often accompanies the Blood Claws in order to curb their worst excesses and battle lust with stern commands and the occasional fist to the face. In battle, the Blood Claws are formed into large enough packs so that they may sustain a few casualties and still prevail. Lapses of martial discipline are usually overlooked by the pack's Wolf Guard mentor until after the battle, for with the proper guidance, the savagery of the Blood Claws' charge can turn the tide of battle. Most Blood Claws are treated as shock troops for the Space Wolves. They prefer to fight at close quarters and are armed with melee weapons such as chainswords and bolt pistols, but there are also 2 subsections of the Blood Claws. The Sky Claws are one such subset of Blood Claws. This specialist unit is composed of the most headstrong troublemakers from each Blood Claw pack, and are often rewarded by reassignment to the Sky Claw assault packs, and thus serve as the chapter's equivalent of assault marines. Entrusted with a jump pack, this vital piece of war gear provides the young warriors with the opportunity to indulge in their desire to charge headlong into the thick of battle. It is said amongst the most experienced battle brothers of the chapter that that if the youngsters wish to indulge in their bloodlust, then let them, and if they die in the process, then at least they will learn a lesson. Though considered a dubious honor by their more mature brethren, the Skyclaws are bound and determined to prove themselves in the eye of their elders. Unafraid and uncaring, they soar fearlessly through the sky in great leaps, taking great joy in watching the enemy crumble beneath their reckless fury of their airborne assault. Truly the most rebellious and free-spirited of the Space Wolves, the Skyclaws are constantly trying to prove themselves. They are known to compete against packs of Bloodclaws through friendly contests of athletic prowess, drinking and eating. Spontaneous and foolhardy, the Skyclaws are known for their fondness of practical jokes. Although transgressions that cost the lives of their fellows are punished severely, even the Wolf Lords admit that they were once young, and so they overlook these offenses. It is rare for a Skyclaw to be exiled for his reckless deeds, but those that push their luck too far and commit an offense against the chapter are assigned a punishment that fits the crime. One who has caused the death of a senior member of the Space Wolves may be struck down, only to awaken to a new life as a med servitor. Another subset of the Bloodclaws, the Swiftclaws, are called from the ranks of the Bloodclaws when the chapter needs a swift and hard-hitting assault force, comprised of bike squads and land speeders. The young and ambitious Bloodclaws are well suited for this role. In addition to forming a light assault force, Swiftclaws will occasionally be tasked with the dangerous quest to track down and slay a particularly powerful enemy. Given the opportunity to sow the maximum amount of carnage and disruption possible, these young warriors apply themselves with a particular relish in the performance of their duties. Some Bloodclaws are so taken by this role, not to mention the opportunity to raise havoc that comes along with it, that they demand their right to permanent positions as a Swiftclaw. Unlike other chapters that use the bike squads primarily for forward reconnaissance, the Space Wolves use these bikes in demolition and close assault roles. If something needs to be blown up or killed in a spectacular fashion, then there are no finer operatives amongst the Adeptus Astartes than the Swiftclaws. If the members of any Bloodclaw packs ever mature and become capable warriors, they will eventually be elevated to the veteran rank of Grey Hunters. It is the Grey Hunters who comprise the main body of the Great Company. These warriors are still hungry for honor as any of the younger brethren, but their raw aggression has been tempered by battlefield experience. Nonetheless, the Grey Hunters stand ready to give their lives in the name of honor. Each Grey Hunter pack can be a small army in its own right, their oath of brotherhood binding them fast in the face of impossible odds. The transformation from aspirant to full-fledged Grey Hunter may take solar decades or even Terran centuries, but should a Bloodclaw not find his death upon the field of battle, then the transition is all but certain. A Grey Hunter's hair begins to gray, and his canine teeth lengthen. His skin becomes more tanned and leathery, and in extreme cases, his eyes yellow and transmute until they look like wolf eyes. These physical signs, borne by the Grey Hunter, mark them as having come into the heritage of a strong and mature battle brother at the peak of their powers, truly worthy of the name Grey Hunters. This name is well chosen, for they are the masters of the hunt, stalking their enemies as they might one of the giant Fenrisian wolves. The Grey Hunters track their prey with a cunning and patience like a wolf pack. Laying down disciplined overlapping fields of fire, the Grey Hunters drive the enemies to seek cover. Once the prey is surrounded, only then do the Grey Hunters spring their deadly trap. The Grey Hunters will either leap at their foes like savage beasts that have long stalked their quarry, or they would draw the enemy forward by feigning weakness while waiting for the perfect time to strike. The battle ploys and cunning of the Grey Hunters are legendary. It is this uncanny calm and patience which distinguishes the mature warriors of the Space Wolves from the fiery young Bloodclaws. Over time, most Bloodclaws and Grey Hunters die in battle, and only a small minority survive to reach a venerable age. But those that do are amongst the most renowned warriors in the galaxy, having fought in the most nightmarish conditions the galaxy has to offer. The collective skills of such venerable warriors are too valuable to throw away upon a blood-soaked assault or a desperate quest for vengeance. These veteran Space Wolves are formed into packs known as Long Fangs. Steady of hand and temperament, they are entrusted not only with the protection of their brethren, but also the heaviest of weaponry used by the Sons of Rus. It is said that the Long Fangs know the soul of every weapon within the armories of the Iron Priests, and take every opportunity to prove it on the field of battle. Long Fangs are the Space Wolves' equivalent of the Codex Astartes compliant chapter's Devastator Marines. These dour and grizzled warriors have survived long enough for the genetic inheritance of the Canis Helix within the gene seed of the Primarch Leman-Russ to manifest fully, as they are literally endowed with long fangs. As the Space Wolf continues to age, their canines lengthen into wolf-like fangs, and their hair and beard grows thick and gray. They once hungered for honor just like their brethren when they were younger warriors, eager to earn a place within the chapter sagas. Yet the hot steel of youth has been tempered by honor and pragmatism, leaving veteran warriors as finely balanced as the keenest blade. The Longfang's solid and reliable demeanor is precisely why Longfangs excel in the role of fire support units. In battle, the oldest Longfang of the Pact is entrusted with selecting enemy targets and directs his brethren's fire where it will be most effective. These squad leaders are able to anticipate the ebb and flow of battle with an uncanny precision. This enables them to function way more efficiently than the Codex Astartes Devastator squads. There are relatively few Longfangs within the chapter, for so many warriors die in battle that only a minority survive to reach a venerable age. Nevertheless, after centuries of long wars, their esteem within the chapter stands as a mountain, commanding awe and respect from all their lessers. And finally we have the Wolf Guard.
The Wolf Guard are an elite band of seasoned warriors, comprising of the mightiest champions of each great company. Heroes all, every member of the Wolf Guard is personally handpicked by their Wolf Lord to be his personal bodyguard. It is his deeds that mark a Wolf Guard rather than his age, so there are hot-blooded young warriors as well as sturdy veterans amongst their ranks. Each has fought hard to earn his place, for only those that consistently prove their heroism through acts of valor and skill are deemed worthy to join such a hallowed company. In battle, they form their Wolf Lord's sharpest blade. Bearing their choice of specialist war gear, they lead the great company's battle line, or seize vital targets in strength. It is the dream of every Space Wolf warrior to join the elite ranks of the Wolf Guard, and they will fight all the harder when their Wolf Lord is nearby, in the hope that their valor will earn them the right to join this legendary brotherhood. Within the Space Wolves chapter, battlefield promotion is extremely common, for Wolf Lords are men of conviction and instinct. There is no special criteria for elevation to the rank of the Wolf Guard. The surest way is to save the life of a Wolf Lord in the heat of battle, for it is the sacred duty of the Wolf Guard to be the sword and shield of their lord. These chosen brethren are favored by their Wolf Lord with the best weapons he has at his disposal, antique weapons of immense potency and ornate artifacts of ancient origin. Few can stand before these heroic warriors, equipped as they are with the best war gear in the company's armory, making them virtually unstoppable in close combat. Each Wolf Guard is expected to fight in the style at which he excels, for their lord cares little for their former roles in their former pack. Not only does the Wolf Guard serve as the bodyguards for the lords of the great companies, but also as mentors for the younger Space Wolves. They are excellent role models, for their battlefield experience and raw talent has earned them their esteemed position. The members of the Wolf Guard may lead less experienced packs into battle, or form a retinue of the mightiest warriors of the great company. The most heroic member of the Wolf Guard, typically the warrior judged by their lord to be a natural-born leader, will be granted command of his great company's Wolf Guard. Known as a battle leader, this Wolf Guard is the champion of his company, trusted with its overall stewardship in the absence of their lord. To be named battle leader is a rare honor that few Space Wolves will ever ascend to, though those that achieve such a position are truly heroes within a company of heroes. With every swing of his axe, or order issued to those around him, a battle leader is responsible for upholding the honor of his lord. If a battle leader sufficiently proves himself and earns the respect of both his fellow Wolf Guard and his great company, he may well find himself next in line for leadership when his Wolf Lord finally passes into legend. Every Space Wolf warrior dreams of a place in the Wolf Guard. To be a member of this selected company is to wield the ever deadliest weapons of war, for a great wolf company's armory is always open to the personal guard of its Wolf Lord. So do many Wolf Guards choose to don suits of sacred Terminator armor, the most formidable personal plate available to the chapter's warriors. The actions of these warriors can turn the tide of any war. Packs of Wolf Guard Terminators form the spearhead of many of the Space Wolves' attack, where they can scorn the foe's defensive firepower as they advance to tear the throats out of the enemy's battle lines. On rare occasion, a great company will armor all of its Wolf Guard and commit them to a single war zone, deploying them as a hammer blow to crush all resistance. The legendary Thunderwolves dwell amongst the remote polar crags of northern Ozaheim, making their lairs within the fabled mountains of the Maelstrom. Many Fenrisians venerate the Thunderwolf as a spirit totem, for the mighty beast is undoubtedly the apex predator in its domain. Only the Space Wolves have the constitution to hunt them in their frozen realm. The perpetual ice storms would flay the skins of any lesser creature in ours. There are several known instances of senior Space Wolves tracking down and breaking in Thunder Wolves. This practice, thought to be an initiation ritual into the upper echelons of the Wolf Guard, has given rise to the legendary Thunder Wolf Cavalry, a small but elite within the ranks of the Wolf Guard, who remain absent from any official Imperial records. The Thunder Wolf Cavalry is a closely guarded secret by the Space Wolves. Thunder Wolves are giant Fenrisian wolves that stand about the height of a Terran rhinoceros and are used as mounts by the most elite members of the Wolf Guard. These great beasts are near mythical, and they are augmented by the chapter's Iron Priest with adamantium jaws, Imperial bionics, and back-jointed metal limbs that end in razor-sharp blades. The havoc that these creatures are capable of creating is said to be startling to even the hardened veterans of the Adeptus Astartes, though there exists a high-caliber vid capture of a trio of Space Wolf cavalry riding into battle against a large mob of armored orcs. The Space Wolves deny the practice of riding beasts to war, yet rumors abound across the Fenris sector about the glorious charge of the Thunderwolf cavalry, and the reason the Space Wolves continue to deny the practice of riding these beasts to war is because they are technically semi-sentient Xenos in the Imperium's eyes.
Now that we know the core units of the Space Wolves, let's take a look at their successor chapters. The Wolf Brothers was one of the only successor chapters of the Space Wolves Legion for quite some time. They were created right after the Horus Heresy, during the Second Founding. Although Imperial records of this chapter are often found with so many redactions that it is impossible to gather any information, it is believed that at some point, the goal of a few members of the Legion was to create enough Space Wolf successors that they could completely encircle the Eye of Terror and build a star empire the size of Ultramar. The only problem with that goal was that the majority of the Space Wolves Legion, including the Primarch Leman-Russ, hated the idea of breaking up the Space Wolves Legion and being confined to the dictates of the Codex Astarte. Nevertheless, there were still a few Wolf Priests that understood that an Astarte Legion without successor chapters could not exert the same amount of influence as one with Scions. Thus, the Wolf Brothers chapter was created. At first, the chapter proved to be as ferocious in combat as their parent Legion. Each new battle brother maintained the hallmark temperament and incredible resolve of a true Sky Warrior of Fenris. They were led by Bjorn Arjak Grimmonson, a highly decorated captain of the Great Companies. The chapter was gifted the homeworld of Karoil, a planet of ice and fire, just like Fenris. Half of the Space Wolves' fleet, half of their armories and priests were handed over to the Wolf Brothers in order to ensure the chapter's success. Unfortunately, something went terribly wrong. It seemed that the genetic code of the Space Wolves, known as the Canis Helix, was too dangerous to be duplicated. The genomes of the Wolf Brothers quickly became unstable, and mutation ran rampant throughout the chapter. The Wolfen curse plagued the successors of Fenris at a level that was too difficult to hide from the Imperium, and so the Inquisition ordered the disbanding of the chapter. Their gene seed stores were to be destroyed, and any surviving battle brother would be given the choice of being scattered to the 6 points of the compass to find glorious death in combat, or be shamefully executed. But before the order could be carried out, the Wolf Brothers mysteriously disappeared. Many within the upper echelons of the Imperium blamed the Primarch Leman-Russ for warning his children and helping them escape, even though no one in their right mind would say it to his face. The Inquisition attempted to destroy any records of the chapter, claiming that the Wolf Brothers were now a renegade warband, but the true outcome of these children of Russ is completely unknown. To this day, rumors persist of small bands of Wolf Brothers fighting within renegade chapters or living as pariahs in the shadows of the Eye of Terror. Sadly, battle brothers of this exiled chapter have been encountered by other Imperial forces. For example, a squad of renegade Wolf Brothers participated in the scouring of Mekena 7 under the command of the Chaos Champion, Onius Praed of the Red Corsairs. Another unlucky Astarte of the Wolf Brothers was found stranded on the demon world of Mendragard, the homeworld of the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion. He pled his service to Warsmith Hanzo, but was later killed by another Iron Warrior. There are also rumors that a Chaos Space Marine warband known as the Dark Wolves is actually the corrupted remnants of the Wolf Brothers. According to one legend, before their fall, the Dark Wolves had been tasked with an all but impossible mission of punishment for some unrecorded failing or crime. This mission took the Dark Wolves to the very edge of the abyss, and some say they lingered there until their souls were poisoned by the ruinous powers of chaos. It is very easy to make the connection between the Dark Wolves' crusade into the abyss and the penance crusade the Wolf Brothers embarked on. Even more convincing is the Dark Wolves' incredible armory. They possess enough heavy tanks to form a significant armored regiment called the Company of Steel. These tanks are all of ancient design and match the Space Wolves Legion's formations of the Great Crusade. The warband even had an ancient, super heavy battle tank called the Fellblade, thought to be the command vehicle of the company war leader. This massive machine was designed from the similar standard template construct as the Baneblade, but much more advanced. The Fellblade is armed and equipped with weapons that aren't seen anymore. The tank's primary weapon is a turret-based twin-linked accelerator cannon, an archaic vacuum-based system that uses a complex overpressure mechanism to propel heavy shells with greater force than what is possible with conventional cannons in the 41st millennium. Knowing the Wolf brothers inherited half of the Space Wolves' armory, it can be worked out that these machines once belonged to the Sons of Fenris. The Space Wolves even know about this Chaos Warband. The Fenrisians hunted them down when they allied themselves to the Demon Prince of Khorne, Taloman, the self-proclaimed Prince of Princes, during the Third Black Crusade in the late 38th millennium. No confirmed records exist of any other attempt to create a Space Wolf successor chapter until the Ultima Founding, more specifically, the Indomitus Crusade. During this confrontation, the Primarch Guilliman and his forces fought a major battle against the forces of Chaos who had emerged from the Pit of Rokus, an ancient warp rift located in a star system that orbited a dying sun designated as 108 Capulus 9. The Pit was an old anomaly. It existed in a region of wilderness space that had never been claimed by the Imperium during the Great Crusade. The Pit was used frequently by both demons and Chaos Space Marine warbands to launch raids into the surrounding Imperial space with relative impunity. Guilliman and his Primaris Marines defeated the forces of Chaos near the Pit, finally clearing the system of all forces of the archenemy. In the wake of the Imperial victory, and after the end of the Indomitus Crusade, Guilliman ordered the creation of the Wolfspear's chapter of Primaris Space Marines. Not only was this chapter composed of many of the honorable battle brothers of the Unnumbered Sons, they also possessed the gene seed of the Primarch Leman Russ. Their duty was to take on permanent garrison near the Pit of Rokus, in order to prevent the Warp Rift from ever being used by the servants of the ruinous powers again. The chapter was given the homeworld of 108 Beta Capulus 9.2, yet the Astartes of the Wolfspears were not happy with being placed on permanent garrison duty. They hoped to remain on the front lines of battle, as befit true sons of Leman Russ. The Astartes of the Wolfspear suffered from a deep burden. Though they knew that the Space Wolves had accepted Primaris Marines into their ranks, there were still many within the Space Wolves chapter who had not yet decided whether to accept these Primaris Astartes as true inheritors of the legacy of the Wolf King. Without a doubt, the reason the Space Wolves never had very many successor chapters is clear to the Imperium. The first obvious reason is the chapter's defiant pride. Since the Emperor ascended to the Golden Throne, the Space Wolves have refused or scrutinized any attempt to censor or control the chapter. Anything that slightly denies the Space Wolves their autonomy is attacked, regardless of whether the restriction is coming from the Imperium or one of their own Space Marine brethren. The second reason is the chapter's genetic flaw. Now that we've gotten a grasp of the core grim darkness of the Space Wolf lore, let's take a look at what they're like against the enemies of the Imperium and also the Imperium. But first, let's start off with why they're so good at fighting Tyranids. The long and glorious history of the Space Wolves is filled with thousands of epic campaigns stretching across the entire Milky Way galaxy. And although the Sons of Leman Russ have never turned down a fight and have collided with almost every foe imaginable, there is a special hatred found deep inside every Space Wolf's two hearts for the Great Devourer. I don't think it's even fair to say that the two factions have a rivalry. While some Tyranid hive fleets act with cunning aggression towards certain foes, the bioforms that encounter the ruthless wolves of Fenris respond with complete recklessness. When the two forces meet on the battlefield, it is as if both draw out each other's most extreme and animalistic tendencies. Like rabid wild animals fighting for the last piece of meat, each faction will willingly lose it all so long as the other doesn't achieve victory. It is known that the tactics of most Space Wolf great companies are far more chaotic than that of any other Space Marine chapter, and while this may be looked down upon by the highly regimented and organized Astarte captains, the erratic tactics of the Space Wolves gives the chapter a maneuverability that the Tyranids struggle to counter. It is certain that most younger Space Wolves will quickly abandon a standard tactical structure in favor of a more brutal but efficient approach. This deeply ingrained ability to think on your feet from the very beginning is what gives the Sons of Rust the advantage when facing the Tyranid menace. A hive fleet is designed to quickly assess a world's military response to the invasion. In this way, the Tyranids and the Space Wolves both share a very similar combat doctrine, A hive fleet is designed to quickly assess a world's military response to the invasion and tailor the second wave to counter the tactics of the defending forces. But this incredible adaptability is thwarted when the defenders are just as willing to alter their strategy in response to changes on the battlefield. Conflict between the two forces always results in some of the most murderous melee combat imaginable. Frenzied warriors butchering each other in a bloody orgy of destruction that makes it incredibly difficult to distinguish who is actually winning. And no great company has more experience and is more willing to tear into the flesh of the Tyranids, like the Space Wolves that carry the sigil of the Bloodied Hunter, Bran Redmaw's Blood Maws. The savagery of this company is legendary. Every battle brother knows that given enough time, the Blood Maws will literally tear the enemy to pieces until there is nothing left but a battlefield of severed and mutilated body parts. This is because there are more Space Wolves bearing the curse of the Wolfen in this great company than all but the 13th Company. One of the Bloodmaw's first encounters with the Tyranids was when Bran Redmaw responded to a request for aid by a beleaguered Imperial hive world that was being invaded by the tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan. The hot-headed young warriors of the Bloodclaw packs were overjoyed as they collided with all manner of Tyranid bioforms in close-quarter melee throughout the planet's Hive City. Each one eagerly boasted their kill tally after every hab block was cleared. Although the Space Wolves were there to work with Imperial forces already entrenched in the region, the Bloodmaws found it easier to progress through the Hive City on their own, claiming that the Imperial Guard would only slow them down. It didn't take long for the hive mind to redirect its strategy and send in a proper counterattack to the newly arrived superhuman warriors, butchering their way through the lesser bioforms. The hive mind allowed itself to be pushed back far enough to a position where the Bloodmaws believed that they were on a strategic point, only to send in a fresh wave of reinforcements that ambushed the Space Wolves on Hell's Ridge. The human Imperial defenders whose spirits were lifted by the Space Wolves' incredible advance, and who were now trying to keep up with the wolves, were caught off guard and easily slaughtered, thus surrounding the Bloodmaws. As each battle brother readied themselves to fight to the last man, the timely arrival of a dozen Stormfang gunships cleared a path for the entrapped Space Wolves to reunite with their wolf lord, Bran Redmaw. Under his leadership, the Bloodmaw's savage counterattack turned the tide against the Tyranid forces. Many years later, the Bloodied Hunters would get another chance to face off against the Tyranids during the Battle of Monberg spaceport. When Hive Fleet Colossus descended in force upon the civilized world of Thrasax, the forces garrisoned there proved unable to stop the Tyranid invaders. Imperial High Command called for all the remaining forces to withdraw and leave the settlers of the planet to their fate so that the Tyranids could be exterminated from space. Bran Redmaw, resupplying upon the planet at that time, objected fiercely to this dictate. He sent 2 full squads of Grey Hunters to reinforce the vital spaceport of Monberg so that the people of the planet could evacuate. A few days before the attack, the Grey Hunters intensively trained the menfolk of Monberg, putting the fear of Fenris into any who considered desertion. Against all odds, the Grey Hunters and their new recruits held the wall for the spaceport against the Tyranid swarms, buying the civilians enough time to escape. When the 6 surviving Grey Hunters finally withdrew from the spaceport, Imperial High Command demanded that they be stripped of all of their honors for disobeying their direct command. Instead, Bran Redmaw promoted all 6 into his personal wolf guard in recognition for their valor. Now let's take a step back and talk about the brutality of the Space Wolves during the Great Crusade. During the Great Crusade, when the Emperor of Mankind and his Primarchs were uniting the scattered human domains all across the galaxy, each of his sons controlled a powerful expeditionary force that operated independently from one another, but when a worthy foe presented itself against the Imperium, the Primarchs would call upon each other for aid. These joint military campaigns didn't always work out as smoothly as expected. Each Primarch and their legions had very different methods of waging war, and at times these differences created tension that would boil over into violence amongst each other. Such was the case when the Primarch Lemanrus and his Space Wolves Legion fought alongside the Primarch Magnus the Red and his Thousand Sons Legion. The Arcreach cluster had been discovered by the Wordbearers Legion's 47th Expeditionary Fleet. It was a group of binary stars occupied by a number of belligerent planetary empires that rejected the Imperium's offer to become part of the Emperor's growing domain. When negotiations broke down between Imperial representatives and the Phoenix Court, a representative body of 6 systems of the Arcreach cluster, hostility commenced. The first 4 systems easily fell to the combined efforts of the Space Wolves and the Wordbearers. On one hand, the Space Wolves waged a genocidal campaign that laid waste to the stubborn worlds, while on the other hand, the Wordbearers' Ashen Circle destroyed much of the culture of the Arcreach cluster, hunting down works of false doctrines and those who pervade it, and consigning both to destruction and eradicating flame. The two legions continued the persecution of this campaign for the next 2 years until only 2 worlds still resisted Imperial efforts. This was thanks in no small part to the Avenians, who lived in silver towers atop the tallest mountain peaks of the Archreach Secundus, which was known to the local inhabitants as Heliosa. It was soon decided that in order to ensure the successful compliance of this sector, a great Imperial presence must be felt. To this end, Leman Russ decided that he would send for assistance from the Thousand Suns in the nearby Agora system to help bring the 6th and final World Shrike into Imperial compliance. When the Legion finally arrived, they found themselves deployed at a more frantic war pace than what they were accustomed to. The Space Wolves' compliance operations were conducted swiftly, and over the next 6 months, the Fenrisians continued to spearhead the efforts on Shrike. The Imperial ground forces found themselves being viciously attacked by varied and hostile avian creatures, which forced the Imperials to modify their weapons for point defense in order to clear the skies around them. These vicious avians were known by the local inhabitants as snow shrikes, razor-beaked birds that made short work of Imperial forces during multiple assaults. Despite the punishing pace of the campaign, the Thousand Suns helped play an instrumental role in the final defeat over the Avenians when they took the objective named Raven's Eyrie 93. This final battle was won in a matter of hours, with only a fraction of casualties incurred by the Imperial forces. The Avenian surviving leaders and military forces withdrew and retreated to their capital world of Heliosa. With the precognitive abilities of the Thousand Suns Corvidae cult members, they were able to determine the location of a hidden enemy force, whom the Space Wolves savagely killed while the Word-Bearers burned their fortresses with putrefying flames. Even after achieving victory, tension between the Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns continued to boil over until it finally came to a head during the battle for Phoenix Crag, Shrike's capital city. The Crimson King had been disgusted by what he saw as the wanton destruction and near genocide committed by the Space Wolves of the planet's population. The Space Wolves pointed out to their cousin Legion that the Avenians were an unrepentant and degenerate society who refused to accept the Imperial truth. Soon tensions flared, and several of the Space Wolves charged the Thousand Suns. The warriors of the 15th Legion utilized their deadly psychic abilities and slew several Fenrisian wolves, as well as disabling the bodies of the Space Wolves themselves. In the midst of the fighting, disaster struck in the form of one of the Thousand Suns, a Pavoni cult member known as Hastur, when he succumbed to the dreaded flesh change after overexerting his psychic powers. This caused his body to spontaneously mutate uncontrollably, which caused panic within the ranks of the Thousand Suns and resulted in further mutations among some of its members. A surging wave of power erupted as Magnus the Red came forth and stepped towards the hideously transformed creature, who seemed to reach out to Magnus as though to embrace him, and the Primarch opened his arm to receive him with forgiveness and mercy. Suddenly a thunderous bang sounded, and the mutated Space Marine's body exploded as a single explosive round detonated within his chest. Silence suddenly covered the entire area as a heavy tink sound of the monstrous expended brass casing struck the ground. It was the Wolf King himself who had ended Hastur's suffering. The Wolf King walked calmly towards his brother Primarch as both sides readied themselves to make war upon one another. Total war between the two legions seemed imminent. Fortunately, disaster was just barely averted when Primarch Lorgar showed up and interposed himself between his brothers. He managed to calm the tense situation. Magnus refused to stand by as the wolves ravaged Heliosa, but Russ responded that this world was discovered by his legion and therefore it was his to do what he saw fit. The people of this world had chosen to fight the Imperium and therefore had chosen death. As the Wolf King departed, he returned to face Magnus once more and swore a bloody oath against the Crimson King, promising that one day soon there would be a reckoning between both of them. The Wolf King then slashed his blade across his palm and let his blood spill to the ground. He then threw his head back and howled, and his warriors added their voices to their master's cry, a lament for the dead and a grim warning of things to come. Now we're going to jump from the past to the present as we get into the Fangs of Ulrick, one of the most notorious Space Wolf units out for the current millennia. The Fangs of Ulrick had taken part in the Stygies Crusade, deep within the Imperium Nihilis. There they had battled against the Space Wolves' ancient enemy, the Thousand Suns, led by the demon Primarch Magnus the Red. They had to save the sector from being overrun by the forces of chaos. Each of the warriors of the Fangs of Ulrick had been handpicked by Wolflord Ragnar Blackmane for their ruthless tenacity, and they were deployed as terror troops behind enemy lines, where their practiced savagery would be most effective. Though the Space Wolves fought with the fury of Fenris, they were faced with hordes of demonic entities summoned from within the warp, and their sorcerous foes created insanity-inducing spells and tore psychic rents in reality to divide the forces of Blackmane. Through trickery and illusion, the Thousand Sons gained the upper hand, wrong-footing the Space Wolves as they tried to hunt down and slay the Tzeentch Legion. Various Blackmane strike forces attempted to regroup in orbit, but their transports were caught up in the roiling warp storms and whisked away as the anarchaic currents of the Immaterium flowed through. The Fangs of Ulrick were aboard one of these transports, the Wind of Fnir, along with the strike force of the battle leader Haldor Icepelt. Their ship was cast adrift in the Immaterium, flung light years away from the Styges sector in a series of uncontrolled warp jumps. Each time they emerged into real space, they witnessed more of the horrors befalling the worlds of the Imperium Nihilus. Whole planets burned with demonic fires, their inhabitants devoured by the ravenous creatures of chaos, and the stars that once shined bright now emitted a deathly glow that infected the minds of all those who looked upon them with utter madness. At every turn, more servants of the Chaos Gods appeared, seeking out fresh souls from which to slake their bloodlust. When the Wind of Fnir finally appeared near a world, it was Vigilus. The Blackmanes aboard at last saw a battleground upon which they could make a stand. Vigilus lay in the mouth of the Nakmon Gauntlet, a passage through the Great Rift that could be used to bring reinforcements into the Imperium Nihilus. Though the world had not fallen to the corruption of chaos, it was beset by multiple threats. Hordes of orcs rampaged across the wastelands between the continental hive sprawls of the planet's surface. Drukhari raiding parties slaughtered the floods of refugees, trying desperately to reach the relative safety of the Haven worlds. And from within Vigilus's own populace arose the mutated throngs of Genestealer cults. If the planet fell to any of these enemies, the Imperium would lose its key foothold in the Imperium Nihilus. Vigilus had to stand, and the Blackmanes would fight to the last to ensure that it did. While the main strike force advanced towards the territories held by the Genestealer cultists, the Fangs of Ulrick proceeded with their mandate given to them by their Wolf Lord. They broke from the pack and headed deep into the orc-infested continent of Megaborealis. There they would hunt in the shadows of the towering Adeptus Mechanicus boar hives, stalking mobs of greenskins through the twisted scrap dunes, slaughtering them in bombed-out manufactorums and in the depths of the yawning strip mines. Since starting their guerrilla war, the Fangs of Ulrick have eradicated scores of orc mobs. The true account of their victories is known only to them, for on the rare occasion that they cross paths with another Imperial force, they maintain complete silence. Only when launching an attack do they allow their inner beast to be given voice, shouting blood-chilling cries that echo across the battlefield, announcing to their foe that death has come for them. The kill team has taken its name from Ulfric Wormslayer, who was selected by Ragnar Blackmane to be its leader. This Reaver pack leader embodies the noble warrior culture of Fenris through his selflessness and dedication to those he leads. He has personally saved each member of his kill team more than once, and adamantly refuses to abandon any battle brother, no matter the circumstance. His Fangs of Ulfric are renowned for their ferociousness in battle and their unwavering loyalty. Ulfric Wormslayer paced along the gantry, taking in more of the industrial sprawl's multitudinous scents with every breath. The rich, ferric smell of rust-covered metal filled the air, from the new corrosion on the recently constructed upper levels to the ancient patina of the deepest infrastructure. Cutting through this, Ulfric could detect the unmistakable odor of spent casings, burning promethium, and fresh blood. His quarry had come through here, and it was recent. The Reaver pack leader reached the end of the gantry and pressed his back up against the side of a chimney stack. The smoke pouring out of the top of the chimney billowed down past him, obscuring his form from any prying eyes that might be watching. He inhaled, and beneath the acrid stench of smoke was the palpable smell of orcs. Ulfric listened for the sounds of greenskins barreling past tangles of pipes and trudging over metal platforms. Despite the din of machinery all around him, the Space Wolf's genetically augmented senses would have allowed him to hear the greenskins' heavy momentum and grunted breathing long before they came within shooting distance. But he heard nothing of his prey. They were still further ahead. As he moved out from beneath the veil of smoke and pressed forward, Ulfric opened a Vox channel to the battle brothers in his kill team. He gave a short, barely audible growl that pitched from low to high to low. It was a signal that they should continue their advance. The Fangs of Ulfric were dotted amongst the infrastructure beneath their leader, out of sight yet as poised to kill as he was. Each was clad in ultra-durable Mark X Phobos armor, the servals of which were fitted with sound dampeners that allowed the robust Primaris Marines to stalk in absolute silence. They moved in a broadly spread out formation, every hunter knowing their place without instruction or line of sight of their packmates, with Ulfric himself taking the lead. Only Leif Thunderhowl, the kill team's aggressive forward scout, was ahead of Ulfric's own position. The Reaver pack leader had ordered Leif to sweep an arc in front of the rest of the Fangs and to relay the position of any enemy he located. A few moments later, the call came from Leif, a short series of staccato growls that would have been unintelligible to any untrained ear or even to other space wolves. But through these sounds, the Fangs of Ulfric were given numbers and location for a mob of orcs that the scout had found. The greenskins were close, and they seemed completely unaware that the Reavers were approaching. Ulfric readied himself for battle, intoning in his mind a quick prayer to the Allfather, and loosening ever so slightly the reins that kept his inner beast in check. There was no need for the Reaver pack leader to give orders to his battle brothers. They were well versed in killing orcs, and knew exactly what they each had to do. He took out his grapnel launcher and fired it into a tangles of pipes overhead, before depressing the winch trigger, hoisting himself up into the air. A split second later, he released the grapnel claps and let the momentum send him arcing onto the high gantries. He landed on the metal grating, barely making a sound, then advanced forward with his bolt carbine leveled. As Ulfric stalked through the dense clouds of steam and smoke, the first greenskin came into view below him. The Reaver pack leader let out a blood-chilling war cry. On the lower levels, Olaf Ice Fang had just moved into a flanking position when the sound of his leader's vox-amplified howl resounded. He charged from the shadows and around the perimeter of a furnace and saw his target for the first time. 3 orcs, armed with burnas, clustered together on a broad expanse of rusted plating, their eyes scrunched closed in a vain attempt to block out Ulfric's mind-piercing shout. Olaf readied a shot grenade, but even before he had it in his hand, one of the greenskins was struck in the chest by a bolt fired from on high by Ulfric. The massive reactive core of the bolt detonated, its blast creating a visceral fissure through the orc's torso. With a snap of his wrist, Olaf followed up on the shot, sending his shot grenade hurtling towards the 2 remaining enemies. It exploded, further frying the overloaded senses and giving the Reaver the opening he needed to close in on them. Olaf's combat knife was drawn, and with a flurry of stabs and slashes, he reduced one of the greenskins to streamers of flesh. But the last orc came charging at him in a blind fury, wielding its burner like a massive club. Olaf rounded on the brute and raised his pistol, but a mighty swipe from the greenskin swatted his weapon aside. The Reaver raised his blade to parry the follow-up swipe, then ducked under a third blow. In an instant, he drove his knife up into the orc's gut, plunging it to the hilt through the layers of sagging flab and muscle. But as he tried to pull back to deliver a final cut, his opponent grabbed him by the wrist with its huge clawed hand. Squeezing the Reaver's arm and keeping its blade lodged in place, Olaf looked up and saw the orc's monstrous face splitting into a wild grin. That's when the brute raised its burner to its other hand and aimed the nozzle directly at Olaf. There was a thud, followed by a meaty squelch, as Ulfric dropped down behind the orc and plunged his combat knife through the back of his skull. Its limp hand dropped from Olaf's wrist, allowing the Reaver to pull his own blade from the greenskin's slumping body. He looked around and saw that his leader hadn't even stopped moving. He was pressing on towards the towering rows of stacks ahead. As he fell in step behind Ulfric, Olaf allowed himself a small smile beneath the skull visor before opening a Vox channel to the leader of the Fangs. My thanks. On the far side of the stacks, a group of 4 burner boys reeled as bolts whizzed at them from left and right. At the Vox signal from their scout, the Reavers had moved double time to encircle their prey, and had opened fire the second they heard their leader's howl echoing through the industrial maze. A bolt struck one of the orcs in the shoulder, and in reply, the injured brute launched a jet of flame from its burner in the direction of the hidden firer. The rest of the orcs took this display as a signal for action, and as one, they charged towards the knot of pipeworks from which the shot had come, bellowing their guttural battle cry as one.
Yeah.
From behind the cover of a thick metallic panel, Eric Trollbane raised his head and saw the trio of greenskins charging directly away from him towards his battle brother, Gunner Greymane, on the opposite flank. He lined up his bolt carbine to try and take one of the running orcs down, but the injured burner boy was still firing his burner and spun suddenly to face the Reaver. Eric launched himself backwards as a wave of flame came rushing towards him, barely managing to clear the railing behind him without being incinerated. He dropped down onto the top of a feeder duct below the gantry, taking quick stock of the plunging abyss on either side of where he had just landed. Then he ran along the duct in the direction of the burner boy. He had to fight to suppress the animal rage that was boiling up in his blood, the flaw in his canis helix that could take him over at any moment. Rage towards the enemy, rage towards Xeno scum. The inner beast needed to be kept in check, lest it cloud his judgment. As Eric raced beneath the field of battle, Thunderhowl surveyed the scene from atop of a tall promethium reservoir, and saw the 3 orcs surging towards the node of pipes where Gunner Greymane was taking cover. Thunderhowl jumped from his perch and dropped down through the smog. The scout extended his grav-chute fins, angling them as he plummeted so that his trajectory would take him into the path of the charging greenskins. He saw the leftmost orc stumble as he was clipped by a shot from Gunner. He whipped out his heavy bolt pistol and tagged the hulking Xenos again, this time bringing it down for good. He retracted his fins, dropping the last few feet to land in front of the 2 remaining greenskins, and was charging towards them as soon as his feet touched the metal. Closing on his 2 opponents, Thunderhowl could see the injured burner boy behind them, still spitting flames in every direction. A crack of thunder sounded, and a shot from somewhere below ripped up through the grating, catching the Xeno-arsonist in the jaw and almost taking his head clean off. The deadly work of Eric Trollbane. With that threat removed, the scout shifted his focus back to the 2 orcs who were almost upon him. The rightmost orc swung his chopper low to the ground, trying to lop off Thunderhowl's legs with a single brutal hack. But the Reaver vaulted over the incoming blow, kicking out sideways as he bound past the enemy. His kick struck home, hitting the brute that had swung at him in the side of the skull and knocking it into its ally. Thunderhowl landed, and with a deft pirouette, brought his combat blade slashing across the chest of his quarry. The bloodied orc bellowed in anger, while the ally it had collided with brought its burner around to point at Thunderhowl, heedless of the fact that his fellow greenskin was in line of fire. Before the orc had time to pour out its burning torrent, a hail of bolts flew in from all directions, blasting great chunks of green flesh from the 2 remaining enemies. Gunner emerged from his firing spot beneath the pipes, Eric clambered up from beneath the grating, and Olaf and Ulfric closed in from the gap in the row of stacks. The Reaver pack leader quickly scanned the battlefield, then opened up a Vox channel for his fangs. All clear. And lastly, I want to explore the brutality of the Space Wolves versus the Inquisition in probably one of my favorite stories of all of the Space Wolf lore.
Although they had defeated all that the forces of chaos had thrown at them during the bloody campaign that was the First War of Armageddon, the victorious soldiers of Armageddon were doomed from the start. They had gained knowledge of the existence of chaos and had been exposed to its corruption. The Inquisition had no intention of letting the wider Imperium discover the true nature of the demonic foe that had attacked Armageddon, or of the ways and means victory had been achieved with the aid of the Grey Knights. The Inquisitors present voted to sterilize and quarantine for life the remaining population of the Hive World, even though it was generally considered untainted and ignorant of the truth concerning the existence of chaos. The valiant Imperial Guard, the Planetary Defense Force regiments, and other human defenders of the world were to suffer the same fate, or be exterminated. The Inquisition ordered all of its people who had fought on the planet, except for the Space Marines, to be rounded up at gunpoint, sterilized to prevent any possible chaos-induced mutations in their offspring, and placed in Adeptus Arbitus work camps across the galaxy, with their world to be recolonized by people from other regions of the galaxy with no knowledge of the war. Against the protest of the Space Wolves and their great wolf, Logan Grimnar, the Inquisition followed through with this plan, and the Grey Knight's frigate, Carabella, still in orbit of Armageddon, was ordered to destroy the first Imperial Guard troop transport to leave Armageddon as it approached the warp jump-off point. Following this first incident, a year-long cat-and-mouse campaign, later remembered as the Months of Shame, took place between the Space Wolves and the human defenders of Armageddon on one side, and the Inquisition and the Grey Knights on the other. Following this episode, Grimnar ordered all the remaining loaded transports to make orbit at the same time, each protected by the Space Wolves' vessels who put themselves in the Inquisition ship's line of fire, with orders not to fire back under any circumstances. Using this strategy, at least some of the transports would safely make it to the system's warp jump-off point. Lord Inquisitor Kisnaros, who led this containment campaign, tried to reason with Grimnar in an exchange that descended into insults and terrible threats. He countered by ordering his fleet to fire at the interfering Space Wolf escorts, as well as targeting the troop transports. However, as inquisitorial ships opened fire, and before the Lord Inquisitor's orders could be complete, Space Wolf's reinforcements, led by the battle barge Gilferheim, transferred into the system, presenting the Inquisition with overwhelming Space Wolf naval superiority. A triumphant Grimnar then ordered the Lord Inquisitor to call off the attack and the chase, but the Inquisitor had no options but to do so. The majority of the troop transports carrying Armageddon survivors had survived the brief engagement. Escorted by Space Wolf vessels, they had safely translated into the warp. With several witness-bearing transports now safely out of the system, the Inquisition initiated the appropriate contingency. In addition to the transports and their escorting Space Wolf vessels, every person, installation, or world that came into contact with Armageddon escapees, even in the most temporary and fleeting manner, was now liable to be cleansed by the Inquisition. Exterminatus was carried out on several worlds, including the planet of Tybulk, which was virus-bombed to oblivion. The planet's fate was sealed when an Armageddon transport briefly stopped at the world's orbiting space dock for supplies. A number of Grey Knight vessels, some veterans of Armageddon, and others who had joined the Lord Inquisitor's growing armada during the containment, were also involved. Among them was a battle barge, Fire of Dawn, the flagship of the 8th Brotherhood of Grey Knights, commanded by Grandmaster Joros, which also carried out Exterminatus missions during the campaign. Lord Joros became the Inquisitor's principal advisor in the interactions with the Space Wolves, as the latter had no experience in dealing with Astartes. Joros advised in favor of appealing to the Space Wolves' instincts, as they respected strength and boldness above all else. As such, the Grey Knight explained to the Inquisitor that they should meet the Space Wolves from a position of strength at all times. Overwhelming force and steadfastness of purpose was proposed as the cornerstone of the strategy to be followed, which the Lord Inquisitor readily accepted. Very quickly, within the inquisitorial side, dissent was building over both the scope and scale of this purge, and the violent actions against the Space Wolves, which in every case went unanswered by them. Some Inquisitors were against the purge from the start, and had voted so in the Armageddon conclaves. The continued campaign added to this frustration. The attached Grey Knights were also frustrated over the course of events, and the fact that they were being used outside of their mission's perimeters. It was they who provided the campaign with its unofficial moniker as the Months of Shame. And in the critics' eyes, the situation was made worse by the fact that Logan Grimnar was holding the high moral ground, as the Space Wolves never fired back during hostilities. As the campaign stretched into 5 months, its cost was rising and its effectiveness diminishing, with no end in sight. Grandmaster Joros proposed that the Inquisition capture Grimnar. In this opinion, this would result in the chapter's capitulation, and the Lord Inquisitor readily authorized the plan. As part of the plan, the Lord Inquisitor asked for a parley with Grimnar, to which Grimnar agreed. The opponents decided to meet in Hycaron, a neutral star system, but the Lord Inquisitor mistrusted the Space Wolves, as also Grimnar mistrusted the Inquisition. Nevertheless, the Space Wolves' parley flotilla translated into Hycarian real space, where the already assembled inquisitorial forces sprung their trap and opened fire. 4 Space Wolves vessels that made up the flotilla were destroyed, and Grimnar's strike cruiser was heavily damaged. The Lord Inquisitor then invited Grimnar to meet with him and discuss his surrender, the end of the conflict, and the reintegration of Space Wolves into the Imperial hierarchy. Grimnar agreed. He and his 3 remaining Wolf Guards traveled to the Fire of Dawn, where all Inquisitors under Kaisnors were present, accompanied by their retinues. Also present was the entire Grey Knights detachment, led by Lord Joros. The Lord Inquisitor tried to explain the reason behind his betrayal of the terms of parley, and offered the Space Wolves peace in exchange for their surrender, or an endless and inevitable ruined conflict for the chapter if they did not accept. Grimnar had not come to surrender or be captured, but to find out who was responsible for violating the sacred oath of armistice. Lord Joros admitted that he, with a heavy heart, had given orders to fire on the Space Wolves vessel. In a blinding display of speed and agility, Grimnar cleaved into the Grandmaster's breastplate and throat with his frost axe Morkai, ending the Grey Knight's life with a single crunching chop. As everyone on the Inquisition side prepared to open fire on Grimnar, the Lord Inquisitor ordered them to hold. Over Joros' body, he again tried to appeal to and then threaten the Great Wolf. Grimnar was unmoved. Then, as the Grey Knights tried to psychically block them from escaping by teleportation, The Space Wolves shot 4 of the Grey Knight's Justicars, who were focusing their collective psychic power. Their deaths breaking the binding attempt. The Space Wolves managed to teleport back to the strike cruiser. Their badly wounded vessel was able to slip away into the void. After the failed parley and attempt to capture Grimnar, the conflict intensified. In the months that followed, the Space Wolves no longer kept their wrath or their guns in check, and often actively engaged pursuing Armageddon containment forces, destroying several Inquisitorial and Grey Knight vessels. Casualties on both sides spiked as armed engagements escalated. At the same time, the containment campaign was less and less successful, even as the numbers of its victims reached into the billions. It was clear that the entire campaign was a failure. Too many survivors had been dispersed to too many unknown destinations, thanks to the Space Wolves' superior cunning and strategy. Amongst the Inquisition's dissenters, things were reaching a boiling point. A widespread conspiracy to assassinate the Lord Inquisitor, supported by ranking Inquisitors and respected Grey Knights, was taking shape amongst the elements of the containment armada. It was the belief of the conspirators that only the Lord Inquisitor's death would stop the conflict and prevent it from developing into a full-fledged Imperial civil war. After 8 months of campaigning, Kais Naros finally tactically admitted that his strategy had been a failure. The Lord Inquisitor announced a new approach. All containment assets were ordered to speed to Fenris, the Space Wolves' lightly defended homeworld. In an unprecedented, last-ditch gambit, the Lord Inquisitor intended to hold the planet hostage in order to force Lorgan Grimnar to agree to the Inquisition's demands. These demands by now had nothing to do with Armageddon, and everything to do with limiting the independence and autonomy of the Space Wolves chapter. The Lord Inquisitor's armada, including a multitude of Inquisition warships, Grey Knight vessels, and an entire Red Hunters chapter fleet, arrived at Fenris and surrounded the planet in high orbit while targeting the Fang, the Space Wolves' famed fortress monastery. It was ready to devastate it with orbital bombardment. The planet was virtually undefended, as the vast majority of the Space Wolves and their chapter fleet were dispersed on missions across the galaxy. The Lord Inquisitor, directing operations from his flagship, again asked for a parley with any ranking Space Wolves available, to which few Space Wolves' presence agreed to. The Lord Inquisitor asked for the Grey Knight Hyperion, who commanded respect amongst the Space Wolves as the Blade Breaker for his role in defeating the demon Primarch Angron on Armageddon, and the Fenrisian Inquisitor, Annika, to join him as representatives of the Grey Knights and the Inquisitorial Ordos. He knew that Hyperion was for a time part of the conspiracy bent on his assassination, while Annika was open about her mistrust of the Inquisitor Lord. However, he apparently wanted the best possible delegation in the parley with the Space Wolves. The team soon arrived on the Fang for the meeting. The Space Wolves had awoken the venerable dreadnought, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, to deal with the Inquisitorial party. This ancient warrior, who had once fought beside the Primarch Lemanrus during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, and had served as the first Great Wolf of the chapter after Russ's disappearance, immediately received the unbiting respect and reverence of the Inquisitorial delegation, and he was thought to be more temperate and wiser representative for the chapter than Logan Grimnar's. The Lord Inquisitor asked for the Space Wolves' express obedience to Imperial authority and the chain of command, and a penitent crusade to be undertaken to answer to the chapter's guilt for attacking the servants of the Inquisition. In exchange, the Inquisition and the Imperium at large would take no other action or censure against the chapter. Bjorn was not impressed, countering that the Lord Inquisitor was asking a proud, storied chapter that had served mankind for millennia to bow to a faceless bureaucrat who ruled according to expedience rather than honor. Further, this was demanded while the Inquisition's orbital guns were locked on the Fang. He asked the Lord Inquisitor to make a more rigorous presentation of his case, but before the latter could start, and to everyone's surprise, the Space Wolves chapter fleet, under the command of Logan Grimnar, translated into the warp near Fenris. The fleet had traveled at extraordinary speed and at the cost of its rune priests' lives to arrive in time. The negotiation abruptly ended, and the Inquisition delegation made haste to its ships. Following yet another short and fruitless exchange between the panicked Lord Inquisitor and the snarling Grimnar over ship-to-ship Vox, an all-out close-quarter naval battle broke out over Fenris. Despite the presence of senior Imperial Navy officers from the Battlefleet Solar, the Lord Inquisitor took command of the Inquisitorial fleet. His panicked state disappeared, and and he exhibited remarkable calmness under pressure and an extreme knowledge of large-scale complex naval tactics. He ordered half of the Inquisition's assets to commence conventional-only bombing on the Fang, whose defense barriers were already engaging his armada, while coordinating the maneuvers and targets of the other half of his ships. Upon detection of the Space Wolves boarding torpedoes approaching his fleet, he ordered the Red Hunters chapter to counterboard the Space Wolves vessels that had fired the torpedoes. While the battle was raging, Grimnar and his Wolfguard teleported to the bridge of the Inquisitorial battlecruiser. As the Wolfguard caused mayhem on the bridge, Grimnar sprinted towards the command throne, where the Lord Inquisitor stood. Despite resistance by Hyperion and the other Grey Knights, and the assistance of Inquisitor Annika, the Great Wolf quickly reached the Inquisitor Lord. Although a powerful psyker with telekinetic abilities, the Lord Inquisitor could not react against the Great Wolf's speed and ferociousness. In one swift, unceremonious move, Grimnar decapitated the Inquisitor Lord. But his death was not enough to placate the enraged Face Wolves, who continued their rampage, fully intending to kill everyone aboard, until Bjorn the Fell-Handed teleported to the bridge and bade everyone to stop this madness. Bjorn told Grimnar to immediately cease hostilities and to find a compromise with the Inquisition and the Imperium. He addressed Annika and Hyperion as the ranking representatives of the Inquisition present, and stated that no Inquisition ship should ever again appear over Fenris. He continued by saying the Space Wolves who had learned of the Grey Knights were also not to be mind-wiped, as was normal in such cases, but instead Hyperion should personally explain the Grey Knights' mission and its importance to all of the Astartes within the Fang, so that such a conflict could never again occur due to misunderstandings or ignorance of the Inquisition's mission. Thanks to this timely intervention and mediation, the battle ended and a truce was sought amongst the combatants. The Inquisition had no choice but to accept this truce, yet they immediately started to ponder ways to bring the Space Wolves to heel, going as far as considering manipulating the chapter's gene seed. The Space Wolves also had no illusions. The Inquisition was not going to leave them in peace. Even as the last Inquisition vessel was departing Fenris, Grimnar and the remnants of the chapter were preparing for the next round of their conflict with the Imperium's secret police.
And that's a deep dive on the Space Wolves. I hope you guys stop judging people who play Space Wolves. It's not just a bunch of children. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share with your friends, and if you want me to do a deep dive on any other topic of 40K, let me know what it is in the comment section below. But this was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, if you took my freedom.